Well, and this is something we've been keeping our eyes on for you. In fact, the minority in Parliament is to hold Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta before the House to present a government response plan to the persistent hikes in fuel prices. In just the space of 2 months, prices of diesel and petrol have increased by over 30%, selling at a high of 8 cedis 29 pesos at the pumps. Already, the public transport operators have effected a 15% increment in transport fares in response to the changes in the fuel prices. But just a week after that adjustment, experts in the petroleum sector are actually predicting that the commodity will hit 9 cedis by the end of March. So what can government do about this? We've been exploring all of this in a report that we have for you. But first, take a listen to the head of pricing at the National Petroleum Authority, Abbas Dasunti, speaking to us earlier.
Whatever NPA does will have to be in the context of the law. So the law will have to guide them too. As a regulator, I think I've mentioned before that we do not make fiscal policies for government in terms of where it raises its revenue from. We would have been happy if there was no tax on petroleum products at all, but that is not the reality. So the reality is that it's a difficult situation for government now. One, government needs to generate revenue to support the budget, and two, prices are rising. So would scrapping all the taxes of petroleum products be a reality? Is that feasible? I'm sure you would agree that that's not feasible for the government at this moment. And that is where NPA looks at the law and where there's flexibility to do something about it. So for us as a regulator, what we are focusing on now is that now that the prices are rising, we have to make sure that, as we always do, that the consumer is not overpriced in the face of this challenge. And even for the supplier of the products, that they are also recovering their investment fairly. Mind you, if the rising prices is having an effect on their ability to supply products, I'm not sure we prefer not to have the product at all. We prefer to have the product and pay the right price for it. So for us, we have made some recommendations to government as to what it can do, but it all depends on the government fiscal space, whether it is.
And that's why I'm concerned about the recommendations. That's why I'm concerned about the recommendations you make to government on this. So many stakeholders have been preferring their best possible approach. What's that of the NPA in terms of the recommendations you're giving? We'll get some more response on that big question today as to what it is that government intends to do. Already we know that the minority in Parliament has served notice that it will hold Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta before Parliament to present a government response on this particular situation. So let's analyze all of this and find out what will be the best strategy in terms of dealing with all of these matters. There are factors also beyond the states, which has got to do with the international prices on the global market. Joining me now is Peter Tekpe. He's an energy policy analyst, understands quite a lot of what's happening now. Peter, so you've been with us all throughout. First, when we crossed the 7 cedis mark. Today, we're breaking the 8, and many are wondering how far this will go. What's your take on this, first of all? Peter Tekpe, if you can hear me, I'm asking you to unmute so we can get the point that you're trying to put across there. Yeah. So what we need to do now is to give you a comprehensive coverage of all that's been happening all throughout the day and the reaction we're getting from drivers as well. There's a report that has captured this, and right when we return, Peter has his take on this matter. Stay with us.
It's the 2nd of March 2022, and I am out and about to gauge the views of some drivers and passengers on the increase of fuel prices. I'm currently at a Goil filling station, and their prices right now is 7.880 Ghana cedis per litre for both super and diesel. So let's find out what the drivers have to say about these prices.
It's affecting expenditure. Yeah. A whole lot. Now, first I used to fill my tank, how do you call it, at 300 cedis. Yeah. But now I'm hitting 400, which is really uncomfortable. Yeah. Okay. So that's basically it.
The prices, it's unexpectable because they just increase it anyhow they want it. The truth is that despite they are going to put all the blame on the Russia case, but that wasn't the case. The prices are even rising before the Russia case came about. Are you getting me? And they are going to use that as a care of, which is very bad. Are you getting me? Because then there's other taxes on the fuel. If they should even remove that one alone, because I quite remember the previous government tried to do something, and then they tried to raise some money, so in case you have this type of problem, they can use to subsidize so that the people in the country will be okay with it. But Lent it wasn't that way. Are you getting me? So we have nothing to do. They are not thinking about us because without the fuel I cannot move, I cannot run. So they are using it because they know that without the fuel you cannot eat or you cannot do any business. So that's why they are using it as a position. I mean, to get whatever they want.
Then you are a taxi driver and it's affecting you every day. So does this mean that you will increase in your fare when people come? Instead of taking like 20 cedis to Osu, you'll take 25 to Osu because of the fuel prices. As a taxi driver, I want to know your thoughts.
Because there are times when you charge, there are some people, they are just crying. At least 20 cedis, but they give you 10 cedis. Yeah. You have to take it like that. Yeah. Because the system is sad. So you have to help them.
And now I'm about to pay to this year. Send the first meeton or echo fall. This year, I mean, 2 million. The young now only use on my say a lot of fair crown when for being come by my own children and the almost share my.
So because fuel prices across all, like, or charge it differently for your passengers?
Me charge you now, also or soon. Send all bed, you know, to say a funny how quick crowd can say 20 hours. Also, person, yes, and a job. And Tiama. Almost more children, passengers almost more children.
Fuel prices no cost no. A dear Koichi because a Juma, Yahuso, Ube Juma, no scout bang, no best scanning in our cut off world. And the Aban on here, no, yeah, baby.
Fuel prices across all.
Near quite dear, once you say 2 free kumanumu. I buy no wire crack, your way and whom you without Kumanuda. If you tell me fee, I see any way me whom be that. Fu akoswa kakata bedu 40 Ghana for 1 gallon. Ye whom be that munja be monka be my why ye brepa yes sir. One should ever street me subium. I'm back. Why? Ye damas.
For the no the band was all not to some. No we had the but for the no we had the one point on to but in the passengers no so yet free. Quite passenger for Carawakasa. Send up with the campo and go on to 25 can get normal. And the pensions on Tuesday, nice bread.
And a very much expected position there. Drivers asking government to intervene, and also a lot more needs to be done about this. We're watching the global market as well. Peter Tekwe is back with us on Zoom. Peter, so that's the concern of drivers out there. Their concern is about the persistent increment in fuel prices. From where you sit right now, is government policy the way to go in terms of dealing with this?
Thank you very much. Well, if you look at the current situation we are facing, Russia plays a very critical role in terms of world supply of fuel, because Russia is among the top 3 world producers apart from the United States of America and then Asia. So what needs to be done is this. Russia cannot be taken out of the equation, because Russia alone as at last year did over 500 million metric tons of fuel production. What it means is that if you take Russia out of the equation, then 10% of the supply of fuel to the entire world is going to be affected, because in all they do about 10%. So it's a very critical situation we find ourselves, and as a result we cannot actually write them out entirely. That's why the situation needs to be managed carefully.
And there's always been a disconnect as to how come countries like Ghana, and obviously we know that Ghana is an oil exporting country, and yet in spite of all of the crude that we're exporting, we're not able to cushion citizens. Can you explain that dynamics for us as to how come we're not able to feel that cushion from government in spite of being an oil exporting country?
Well, the issue is that we have about 97 countries in all, producing this oil. Ghana is about number 33 and just a little below 200,000 barrels a day, when Russia and Co are doing over 1 million. And so if you look at the situation, even though we are producing, the volume is not enough. That is why we have to depend on a lot of import. And assuming we are producing enough, our production, arm is off. That is, I'm talking of Temoya refinery. So we cannot even refine it. And as a result, government is also
just on that point, government indicates to us that the plan is to convert Tor at some of the facilities into a tank farm. That obviously should be a policy that would help the economy and cushion Ghanaians, isn't it? But it's not working.
No, that will not solve the problem at hand. The reason is that if you don't produce and you import, then the entire management is out of your control, and that is what is causing us now. Assuming Ghana is producing enough to sell enough in country to produce enough, what it means is that government will then not be, or the private sector will not be spending a lot of foreign currency to be importing. When Tor produces, all the BDCs go and buy in Ghana cedis. So it reduces the impact of foreign currency demand as well. That is why we need Tor to produce. If you turn Tor into a tank farm, facility, it means that you are going to import more. And looking at what is happening in Russia, with Ukraine currently, it means that once prices goes up, then we are going to be impacted. So we don't need to convert Tor into a tank farm. We have to rather expand BOST and keep Tor as a strategic partner in the production of crude, which will reduce the demand on foreign currency drastically. So we need Tor to be running.
Right. As we speak now, we're keeping our eyes on Parliament to see if minority will go ahead to get government's response plan. But do you really see a plan ever since, of course, the NPA started the projections as to, and not just the NPA, we've seen COPEC, we've seen the National Petroleum Authority also giving us clear indications that fuel prices may remain high on the market for quite some time. Are you seeing a clear government policy in response to what's happening?
Exactly. In fact, government actually knows what is happening more than even us. But there is a deliberate attempt on the part of government, not unintentional, but the issue is that government needs money. I mean, we all know what is happening. So if you look at the situation, government does not, seems not to care, but that is not the situation. The situation is that government needs money. And so at the time when prices are going up in the world market, they have to even bring in the taxes that they have even temporarily suspended. Why? Because government is constrained in terms of revenue mobilization. But I keep saying something that government needs to sacrifice at the time we are in now. The word is sacrifice. Why? Tomorrow, price can get to $150, $200. Is government saying they are still not going to do anything? No. That is where the sacrifice comes from. Because where we are getting to now, the impact is becoming huge. You know what? Prices of goods and services are going up. Disposable income is remaining the same. And when it happens like that, the citizens are more impacted. So what government needs to do is to sacrifice part of the taxes. Because
and let me just take your thoughts on this, because that's what we've been watching closely, how to cushion consumers. But the point has been about the price stabilization levy. Questions as to whether or not government should account for that fund and why we're not using that judiciously to cushion the citizenry at this point, particularly when payments have been made for some time. The suspension was brief. So why are we not making use of that levy as of now?
You see, yes, it is very true. And one of the issues that I think the citizens have in terms of tax payment is about transparency and accountability. I think that nobody will have problem in paying tax if there is proper accountability. And it depends. That's why trust needs to be developed. If somebody is managing something for you and the person is not accounting for it properly to your satisfaction, then trust is broken. And that is what we are facing now. Not only that tax, but even the tax that is taking care of Tor debt as well. As it stands now, nobody has given us detailed account of how much has been accumulated in terms of payment to Tor debt recovery levy, how much has been accumulated in terms of cash, how much has been paid, what is left. All we know is that Tor is going down because it's having financial crisis. But we are not being accounted to in terms of how much has been accumulated to defray that cost and how much is left and what is the actual situation on the ground. That is the problem. And so where we find ourselves now, that stabilization levy is far off. That should have been taken out of the
price build-up, because we need that to be taken out. The reason is that it was introduced. Look, what is happening now is just a complete reversal of what happened when the tax was introduced. It was introduced when prices at the world market was also going low. Now prices at the world market is also going up. So what do? We have to take it out. But like I said, government needs tax revenue to be able to, administer all the infrastructure project that they have, budgeted for, and that is the reason. But where we find ourselves now, government has no option than to sacrifice part of the taxes in the price build-up. And you see, this cannot be permanent. You do it temporarily, like we did for the other two. You can do it for 6 months.
But Peter, how about
you introduce it again?
I get the point, but how about being holistic in this approach? The fact that there are external factors that are way beyond the control of government in this case. You were just talking about Russia and some of the OPEC member states who could, cause some level of destabilization on the global market. That's a perspective to also explore, isn't it?
Of course, that is why austerity measures are needed. When you are faced with a situation where there's nothing you can do, it's beyond control, what do? It's just like when COVID set in, it was beyond government. What could government do? They introduced austerity measures to support businesses. We find ourselves in a similar situation. We can't control the price at the world market. So what do? We introduce austerity measures in the short term or in the medium term by reducing some of the taxes. Then you let the Ghanaian public know that, look, because of the situation we find ourselves, this is what government can do to support by taking out tax A, tax B. When things get stabilized, it will be reintroduced again. Then people know that, oh, government is thinking about the suffering the world price is bringing on the citizenry. Right. But when there is silence, then it becomes a cause for concern because the impact of price increases affect everything.
All right then.
Don't forget that the transport operators have indicated that they have signed an MOU with government that when the increment gets to a certain percentage, they also have to increase their fares as well. For how long? It's like now is the Ghanaian who is facing all the issues that this Russia, Ukraine, battle is bringing. It's like everything is on the Ghanaian and nothing could be done. No, as a leader, when you are faced with a critical situation, there are solutions that are professed. We have emergency solution, we have medium-term solution, we have short-term solution, we have long-term solution. Where we find ourselves now, we need emergency situation solutions. Just like when COVID set in, government brought in emergency solutions to support the citizenry. We are in the same situation and we need the same support from government as well.
Where are we? Are we out of the woods, and is this just the tipping point? Are we going beyond 8? What's your prediction?
No, we are not. Nobody can predict, Putin. When he was saying he was going to attack, people were taking it for granted that he can't do it. He was just saying it. We just woke up one day and then it all started.
Right.
When it will end, nobody can tell. That is why we need a solution in country to be able to support the economy, because we should assume that this is going to continue for some time because nobody has control over what is going on in terms of in the minds of Putin. So what do? We have to then look at a solution in country to support the economy, and that is what is needed now because we cannot control it. Well, it can fall as well because that is what is happening. But at the end of the day, we are in a situation where it is going up. So what do? Government needs to come in. Where we are now, the only solution is that government needs to introduce some measure because the price will keep going up. And when price keeps going up, the prices will keep changing at the pumps because the private businessman who is selling the fuel at the pumps is looking at his margin. He will never sacrifice all his margin to make a loss because he need to pay salaries, he need to pay bills. Just like government also need to pay bills. So what do? Both of us sacrifice. So while they are sacrificing on their margins, government also need to sacrifice on their taxes. Then at the end of the day, we all meet itself at some point. Then there will be a win-win situation. But when one person is sacrificing and one is not, look, the prices you see at the pumps now, the fact is that if the OMC should introduce their margin, actually, we will be heading towards 9 cities.
Right.
That means that they have sacrificed. That's what government also needs to sacrifice.
Peter, there are more reactions to this. Fortunately, Kojo Poku, who's also an energy analyst, is joining us by phone to share his concerns with us as well. But could you, the focus is also about consumers and what they could do in these trying times. What's your prescription to all of this?
Can you repeat the last part of your question?
Yes, so I was asking about, obviously, the consumers. They are bearing the brunt of all of this. What's your prescription in terms of what the average consumer out there could do to perhaps cut down costs and also to cushion themselves, but particularly as we're not seeing any intervention come through from government at this point?
Well, some of us have always said that when it comes to fuel, because it's a deregulated market, we should always try and look out for the cheapest filling station to buy from. Though people are quoting that prices are around 8 to 9, there are some filling stations that will sell a little bit up below 8 cedis. So anytime you take the total price, there are some indigenous filling stations, OMCs, that will sell 30 pesos to 40 pesos cheaper than Total. So what governments can do, and most people should do, is to look out for the cheaper filling stations and buy from. Most people will say that government should reduce taxes. And then I always that the 30, 40 pesos that government will take out of the taxes, you are already having that on the pump if you look around and shop.
Right. So you are relying largely on the business cycle, the fact that the markets will be able to correct itself. But we know that will be a short-term measure.
No, the market will not correct itself. Right. The deregulation is not working well enough for the competition for the market to correct itself. But what I'm saying is that if you are saying that prices are high and somebody is selling it at 8.29 or 8.3, there's somebody who's selling to you at 7.9. So if you ask me what the consumer can do, he can buy cheaper.
Yes, but that's why I was referring you to the point that would obviously be a short-term measure. The fact that it will obviously increase demand on these OMCs, and then they would obviously increase the price. That's the short-term effect of it. So it won't make much of a difference, will it?
No, it won't, because in the short, these prices on the world market is not a long-term measure. I mean, this war is on now, but I can assure you that what we are looking at is prices which are high in the next a couple of months. By March of April, prices will come back into the lower 90s.
Right.
When this war starts, because of the uncertainty and nobody knows how it's going to escalate, the market behaves the way it's behaving. But after a while, it will normalize.
Right.
The OPEC countries will most likely have to pump more oil, and the prices will recede. So in the short term, while the prices are high, find a cheaper filling station and buy from. It's the shocks of war. That's why nobody likes war. Unfortunately, there isn't much. We all know that government is trying to even raise more revenue through taxes. So it's very unfortunate that people will say that, government should reduce taxes.
Right.
The government wants to collect more taxes. How do you now get the same government to reduce taxes?
Kojo Poku there is an energy policy analyst. Earlier you heard from Peter Tekpe also sharing his thoughts on this matter. We will definitely bring you some updates here on the Joy News channel. But